Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Men of the Kingdom podcast. My name is Kyle. This is my co host, Aaron. If you're new to the channel, we want to say welcome. If you are one of our returning viewers, we want to say welcome back. The purpose of all of this is very simple. We want to help men live successful lives according to God's design. And we thank you for tuning in here today. We're super excited because we have a very special guest, one that actually our paths crossed years ago because we all went to the same college. So I'll let Aaron do a little introduction, then we'll kick it over to Tyler to tell a little bit more about himself.
Yeah, I'm really pumped about this episode. Tyler is a guy that I got to know very briefly in college. He's a few years older than us, and I think he's going to provide a really cool perspective of a life of faith, right? And not a life of faith that, was completely perfect. And I really resonated. We were talking before the show of just in our college years of how those can be really tough times. And as guys, we can kind of be sidetracked and, pulled in a lot of different directions. So I'm super excited about this. I think we're going to get into some real stuff. So if you're a young guy watching this, I would encourage you, get your notebook out. Tyler's a guy that I think we all can learn from. So we're going to be taking notes. We're going to be learning some things, and just super excited to share Tyler's wisdom with you tonight. So TP, would you mind just giving the viewers a quick intro on maybe who you are, what you're up to now, and kind of how our paths crossed and what you were doing back at SMSU?
Yeah, you bet. Appreciate you guys having me, first of all. The nice thing about having someone like myself on, I'm from Iowa, live in Iowa now. So if there is someone grabbing a notebook, they're not going to be any big words that I'm talking about. It's pretty easy to follow, right? Yes. When you're from central Iowa, we don't use big words around here. So pretty easy content. So now I'm married now. Been out at Southwest for 10 years, kind of crazy. But married. I have 3 kids. My oldest is 3. So I have a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And I own an insurance and financial services practice. So I do insurance and then financial planning for people all actually Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, and Minnesota. So been a fun journey and an eventful journey. Really, the last 15 years really have been a really cool time for me. I've grown a lot. I've fallen on my face more than I wish I would have, but all it's kind of led me to a place where, I'd say real dependence on God, which is a good way to live. I've learned. So again, appreciate you having me, excited to have a conversation.
Yeah, I can kind of kick it off because one thing I've noticed about you, and I've followed you on LinkedIn, like we talked about before this, and every time you post, like it seems, and I can tell you really enjoy what you do. Like you're passionate about it. You love the youth, like just everything you're doing. And when I met you in college, you had this like energy about you, but I'm assuming you probably maybe weren't always like that. And because we all met at college, there's a lot of young men who are watching the show and in school right now where you're at school, but you don't really know what you want to do with your life, where you're going, where your direction is. So can you maybe speak to that? Did you kind of know you wanted to go into insurance, own your own business? Like, how did you go from college to where you are now, married, business owner? Like, how did you figure out what you're supposed to do in life?
Yes, that's a $1 million question, Kyle. And I would hope, I'll back up and say I love what I do. All right. I truly, truly love coming to work. I love the people I work with. But if any 10-year-old kids at elementary school right now saying, you know what, when I grow up, I'm going to sell insurance, I'm gonna push them right to maybe think professional athlete or police officer or something a little bit more exciting then. So no, the short answer, I didn't aspire growing up to be an insurance agent or financial planner. With that being said, the NFL stopped recruiting slow, unathletic quarterbacks who weren't very accurate. And so the NFL never called. I'm still waiting for that call, actually, 12 years later. But I don't expect it to come. So I have a passion for people, man. I've always wanted to just help people. It's kind of a cliche thing, but I do think if you live out like what you are meant to do, if you live out your why, if you will, you will find fulfillment in your job. And so I've always looked for opportunities, both in my profession and outside of my profession to help people. And specifically, we were talking a little bit before, typically kind of the next generation, the next generation of specifically young men. You know, I was very blessed, man. I think about it a lot more as I've gotten older and as I've become a parent. Man, I couldn't have had a better foundation than I did with my parents. You know, just amazing faith. They're just strong people, and they really helped set that foundation for me and my faith as I was growing up. And I just can't thank them enough for that. And I just know a lot of people don't have that, right? Like they don't have the parents that push them to church and push them to the word. And I was lucky enough to have that. And so I felt like I had some really good disciplines and spiritual disciplines as I got to high school, through high school. And then, you know, like most, I don't know if most, it feels like most maybe, young men, you know, I kind of got sold that college experience, right? And I bought it, man. I got the checkbook out and I wrote the big check for that college experience and made about every questionable decision that 18 to 23-year-old. I took a 5-year plan at SMSU. You know, every decision that they could make, you know, I was making it, right? And man, I really learned the brokenness that comes with sin, right? Like it was tough, right? Like so many times where you feel like you're doing it because everyone else is doing it, but you know in the word that it's wrong. You know the decisions you're making are bad decisions. And you're kind of, I've referenced this before. I call it kind of like a Build-A-Bear gospel, right? Like where I was like, gosh, I really like that part of it. And I know it's saying I shouldn't be doing these things, but I'm just going to focus on the things I'm doing well. And I'm just going to kind of like I'm going to choose not to follow the other stuff that Jesus is telling me not to do. And it's brokenness, man. It led to a lot of brokenness. And it also created a lot of habits that didn't stop after college, right? Like they don't just like, oh, I'm done with college now. And so now I don't drink as much, or I don't, you know, that type of stuff. And so this brokenness continued, and it made its way into relationships. It made its way into, you know, healthy relationships that weren't as healthy because of just the way I was, right? And ultimately has led me to a place of dependence on Jesus and really what's important. But my mission, I say all that to say, is I want to help our next generation of men and young men understand that, like, you don't have to learn the way I learned, right? Like there's a Jesus out there that will tell you, you know, I grew up in the Catholic Church. We always say, the peace I give to you, and we shake hands and peace be with you, right? And Jesus tells us he wants to give us peace, right? Like he openly tells us he wants to give us peace. And if we just listen to what he's telling us and what he's preaching, there's so much peace to be had. So yeah, man, that's really kind of where I'm at now is and why I go back to Southwest, why I do the things I do, is just try to reach people and help them, you know, wherever they're at.
Sweet.
Yeah, that's cool. That actually is a really good transition into my question that I had for you. And I just love too your authenticity, Tyler, of, you know, you were a quarterback in college. I think you even played some basketball, if I remember too. You're at a D2 school.
Played is a very relative term. Yes, I was on the team.
You were on the team.
Yes.
It's one of those things. It's like, you know, at a D2 school, it's like you can kind of be a bigger fish in a smaller pond versus like if you're at a huge school and maybe you're somebody who's just on the team or whatever. But it's like being an athlete at a D2 school, especially playing quarterback. It's like people know who you are. Like it's kind of a big deal. You know, a lot of guys that have that type of life, that's sort of like their prime time of their life. And it's crazy to hear that was a time for you that led to a lot of difficulty and temptation. I think that's really cool that you share that. But my question is, you're obviously working with a lot of younger men. I see that you have a Bible study with some younger guys that you're getting started up. What challenges do you see young men facing today spiritually? And if a young man is watching this and they say, hey, I resonate with one of those challenges, I mean, like, what advice do you give some of the guys that you mentor or that you guys are working on the Bible study with?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, one, to just their access to information, their access to everything is crazy, right? The technology, the access to the technology, but their phones and what's available, that can be such a powerful tool for them. It can really be a thing that can bring people down, and just the dependence on it. But just the amount of exposure that young men have to, I mean, pornography, to, I mean, really, I mean, scandalous stuff that's just is becoming the norm, right? Like, it's becoming just like what you see on average television on a Tuesday night. That they almost become, I would say, like, immune to like the feeling of like what that stuff actually can bring you, and it feels normal, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a little bit of the messaging that I'm trying to help them with, or if people are struggling with that, it's like, it felt normal for me to party as much as I did too in college. Like, it felt normal because that's what it seemed like you were supposed to do. But the brokenness that came with that normal feeling, like, that didn't ever feel normal to me, but I did it anyways because I felt like that's what my buddies were doing. That's what was going on. Right. And so I think that what I had 10, 12, 14 years ago, when I was just starting college, that's times 10 now. I mean, it is the exposure that those guys have, just the day-to-day, what they're seeing even on Instagram and all of that stuff. It's just so much different. I didn't have exposure to that because I'm old, man. Like, we didn't have that stuff. Facebook was just coming around. If you went to the computer lab and you got on your Facebook account, right? Like, that's how it was when we were going through school. It's just a completely different vibe and a different world than they have with the Snapchats and the things like that. So there's so much stuff getting thrown at them, and then the constant battle to make it feel like that's normal, and it's not normal, and it's not biblical. And again, like, I only know this because I made the decisions to not buy in, right? Like, not buy into the gospel, in that stage of life. And so I'm just trying to help them understand that, like, it's not normal. If you just follow what Jesus tells us to do, there's just so much peace there, right? And you won't find it in the places that we get told you'll find it.
So true. Like, we've Aaron and I talked about this so many times, like, just like you're saying, the access to information and sexual content, whatever it is, like Instagram, like, you could be literally going through innocent stuff, like looking for golf content or whatever. Like, you go to the Discover page where there's a lot of good information and cool stuff, but it's like bombards you constantly. Yeah. And so, to your point, it's a struggle for guys, and including myself. Like, I'm at that age where, like, we grew up with social media, and you just have to be on a guard all times. And that's kind of like my question for you. I've noticed in my own life, my ability and strength to resist temptation has a lot to do with time I'm spending in the Word, with good people, and these rhythms you build up. And I'm curious, for a guy like you who's running a business, who has a family, who has kids, who has a wife, all these things that vie for your time and can add stressors and a lot of blessing, of course. But I notice when I'm tired and run down, it's a lot easier to fall in temptation. So, like, for you, who has a lot on your plate, what are some rhythms you implement? Like, of course, reading, praying, I would assume that's part of it. Are there other things you would advise even younger guys who maybe aren't at your stage yet? Like, these really helped me do these things. Like, what are some things that come to mind from like a rhythm standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I probably need to tell myself this message sometimes, Kyle, but probably more often than not. But you can tell what you care about by what you spend your time doing, right? Like, what you're actually doing.
Yeah.
And so, and what you schedule out in your calendar, right? And so one of the things, as you get busier and busier and you guys get families and things like that, like, your calendar becomes kind of your thing. Like, you have to be able to control your calendar, especially if you're an entrepreneur. If you don't control your calendar will control you. Right. And so I have to make sure that if I truly believe that this is an important part of my life, I have to make sure that there's stuff on my calendar that supports that, right? Like, that is, I do not miss, as part of who I am and what I do. For me, we don't miss church on the weekend. That's a non-negotiable, and I'm in my family. It doesn't care where we are in the world. We're on vacation. It doesn't matter. We're going to be at church. So that's a absolute given. But then Tuesdays I run my youth Bible study with my high school interns in the mornings at 6 a.m. I'm a morning person. I love waking up in that mindset and getting the day started that way. I mean, people can argue that they could do it at night, and I'm sure you can, but I just love the foundation it sets.
Yeah.
So we do that Tuesday. My wife and I are in a small group with other people in our similar age demographics, parents that are battling the same spiritual battles that we are. Wednesdays, and then Thursday mornings I'm in a men's group and at 6 a.m. as well, where we're getting into the word and we're going through different Bible studies and stuff like that with other men. Same thing, young kids, married, that are trying to figure out this life together, right? And how to live it spiritually and how to live it the right way. And so, I mean, you're a product of your environment, right? And so I think being meticulous and really intentional about my environment and about who I choose to spend time with. Not that you can't spend time with a lot of people, but the more that you get on your calendar, like you said, running a business, there's a lot of people that are dependent on you to be there for them. You want to be a good husband, be a good dad. Your time becomes a lot more precious. Your extra time becomes a lot more precious. So what do you choose to do with that? So I have to make sure that stuff's scheduled. It's non-negotiable. It's on my calendar, and it's gonna be a part of what I do every single week without question. So that would be the best advice I would have is like, what does your calendar look like? Your calendar will tell you what's important to you. And so if you look at your calendar and there's nothing spiritual on there, and I've been guilty of it, like 100%. Then I'm just telling it. I'm making a statement that my work is the most important thing in my life at that time, And so that's really the best advice I'd have is just make sure your calendar's in order.
That's good. Yeah, I feel that. I'm nowhere with the responsibility you have, but I feel that even now as you get older, after college, just like the weekends fill up, you're like looking months out where it's like, man, where's my next free weekend? Or even during the week, I have this day, and it's easy to just get going. And yeah, I love that. Like run your calendar, the calendar runs you. Like I feel that, and I can't imagine like when you have a family, kids, it's probably even amplified that much more. That's good advice.
And the other thing is like, I mean, I like to exercise in the morning too. And so like, even like listening to a gospel or listening to something like this while I'm exercising, that's the good side of technology, right? That we have the ability to do that type of stuff that we haven't been able to do in the past. Yeah. So being able to listen to spiritual things as you're exercising, gospels and things like that, man, it makes a big difference. So if you can start your day, I always feel like if I can start my day with moving my body and then like growing spiritually, like that's a pretty dang good foundation for the rest of the day.
Yeah, that's I'm glad you brought that up because I've seen you post about this on your LinkedIn of how you and your team starts your workday. And I know that you guys have kind of a regimen, and I think it's really cool how you guys lay that out. So what does that look like? And then my question would be, obviously not everyone in this video is going to be in a company like that. They might be in a company that doesn't have anything to do with faith or whatever. And it's cool too. Like you're in the insurance business, right? It's like you're in a pretty secular workplace. It's insurance. It's very practical. But how does your team start their day? And how could someone who's listening to this apply that same principle in their life?
Yeah, so we have an 8:15 team huddle every morning. And it starts with gratitude. So every day we go around. And the first couple times it can feel kind of cheesy to people, right? Like, what are you grateful for? That's how we're going to start our day. No, this isn't third grade. We're grown-ups. We're doing this. But I'm telling you, so we start with gratitude. What are you grateful for right now in this moment? And sometimes that's because that's Iowa won last week, or the Vikings finally didn't choke in the fourth quarter or something, right? Like that can make you feel good. And so we're grateful for that, right? But it gets you in a good mood for one, and then a good mindset. And then what was the best thing that happened yesterday? So we're going to recap the day before, but something positive, right? Like what went well yesterday? And again, you get things all over the map, right? And then we talk about impact. That's one of our core values in our business is impact. Our goal is to impact people. And so who did you impact and how? And so we go through that and different things, and different people have different ways of doing that. My sales team maybe brought on a new customer, they saved some money, or or they expanded some coverage, and that they felt really good about that, and they impacted that person. My customer care team, they might have helped someone through a difficult claim or something like that, and really held their hand and made sure everything was taken care of. That's a huge impact to that person in a tough time, right? But we get our mind in a place of gratitude and a place of servants. Like we're going to be servants, right? And when you start your day like that, it's just that's the foundation. Again, like it sets the foundation for what the rest of the day is going to look like. And then we plan out the day, right? What's the most important thing? I don't know if you guys have ever read the book, The One Thing, but it kind of talks about what's the one thing that you can do to make everything else a little bit better. So we kind of talk about that. What's the one thing you can do today to make your future self a little bit easier, right? And we work through that. So, and then we do a recap of where we're at from our goals and everything like that. But just, it's 15 minutes, but it really gets people in a good frame of mind. And if I were to, I've always challenged people, like, I don't think, like, a lot of people have a boss, and like I've had lots of bosses in my life, but like that doesn't like define how I show up to work or what I do in my office or in my place of work, right? Like, so if my boss is not a spiritual person, if they're not a Christian, that doesn't mean like I can't spread my faith in the workplace. There's very few, and it's not, maybe you're not going out throwing holy water on customers, right? But at the same time, like, how are you living? How are you showing up? And are you willing to pray for people? Are you willing to have a conversation and bring that stuff up to people? Because although I have had bosses that are not faith, they wouldn't have a strong faith, and they would tell you that. That did not stop me from saying God bless in emails. That did not stop me from every time I wrote an email to my group. It always said God bless you every single time. Like I don't care. Like and so I think take some ownership in how we show up to work, because I've also never had a boss that said you can't do that. Like you can't, because if what I know to be true is most employers are looking for people who are upbeat, positive, and work hard. So if you're upbeat, positive, and work hard, and oh, by the way, you have a strong faith and you want to tell people about Jesus, they like the first three a lot enough that they don't care about the last one, right? Yeah. And so even if that's not their thing, they're not going to be like, well, they're doing really well for us, but they like that Jesus guy, like, no, they'll keep you around, right? And the more people you can reach. But so that's what I would just be cautious about, how you show up to work, and just worry about yourself, right? Like, and not from a like keep to yourself, but worry about your own actions. Don't worry about like my boss does this or my boss does that. Like, don't let that stop you.
Yeah, I like that, what you said there in terms of, sometimes sharing the gospel in the workplace can be something as small as just a God bless in an email, or, somebody's going through something, just saying, hey, man, I'll be praying for you, or even asking people, hey, what can I be praying for you for? I like that because it's not, like you said, super in your face of really aggressive. But that was a question I had for you, is what is Tyler Peschong's personal philosophy as it relates to sharing the gospel? Are you more on the side of, hey, I'm going to try to take every opportunity that I possibly can? Or are you more, I'm going to pray for people, I'm going to ask the Lord to put that on their heart? Like, where do you kind of land? And just kind of maybe give people some practical tips, or just share your personal philosophy of how you go about sharing the word.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I'm probably working on, to be honest with you, Aaron, like is trying to be more bold in my faith, in my discipleship. And I kind of have a spiritual mentor, also at SMSU grad, Taylor Hughesby, that I turn to for things. And one of the things that I've learned from him that I thought was just like kind of one of the most powerful things is, oftentimes it's like, oh man, Kyle's going through something. It's like, hey, Kyle, I'll pray for you, man. Like, Taylor prays for you. Like, he just stops and he prays for you. And he'll send me audio messages if I'm like, hey man, this is not going well right now. Like, I got something going on. It's not good. I need your help. Like, I need some prayers. He stops. He sends me a prayer, an actual prayer audio message, and he prays for me, prays for whatever's going on. And that's been a huge thing for me, and something I've been trying to do more of for people. It's like, I don't want to just tell people that I will pray for them and then go back to eating my double cheeseburger. Like I want to pray for people, right? Like, and so that's something I want to do a lot better with it, and I'm really working on is really taking the time to pray for people. It's powerful, and I listen to your podcast on prayer and the importance of it, and it's true, right? I mean, this is our time to spend with God, and if we have that opportunity to spend it, and pray for someone, let's take advantage of that opportunity. And then, even using my platform as a business owner, and I think we all have platforms, right? But using that as a way to be a disciple and spread the word. And, I mean, it did take a little bit of a risk to ask, a bunch of high school interns that work here, hey man, you guys want to do Bible study at 6:15 in the morning? I didn't know how they react. I didn't know how their parents would react, but I was like, you know what, this is about Jesus. It's not about me, and maybe I can reach a couple of them. Well, sure enough, it's like in, and I mean, it's been so cool. And then they've been amazing disciples, bringing people, some of their classmates in as part of the group and stuff like that. But it does take bold steps. And I think as men right now in our world, like, we need to have bold faith. Like, and I know when I haven't had bold faith, and I go back to that kind of build a bear discipleship that I was in, it's like pick and choose a little bit of here and a little bit of that. Like, that's not very bold faith, and it's pretty obvious to the people that you're around that, like, yeah, you might go to church on Sunday, but like it's not bold, or you're not taking a stand of your faith. And I think if we really want to make change and let people know about the power of Jesus, like, we have to be bold in our faith, So it's not something I'm great at right now. For the long time, I would have been like, I'm just going to try to live well, right? Like, and then hopefully people, they'll maybe ask me. You know how many people ask me? Not very many, right? Like, and so I think it takes some initiative from us, to take a step and say, yeah, like, I'm going to do something about this.
Hey, that's such a good reminder. I feel convicted as you're saying it, because actually this morning, so I was telling Aaron before he jumped on here, it's funny when you said, like, look for opportunities to talk to people, like how God will, like, I swear, just like drop people in front of you. And so this morning, I'll share a story. I was in the kitchen doing my same routine I do every morning. There's this lady in front of me at the fridge, and she had this sweatshirt on. It was like, I can't remember the exact words, but it's like, forever in my heart, my husband. I know you, something along those lines. So I had to ask. I'm like, so, like, what's the shirt about? I didn't know if it's for like a friend or whatever. She's like, yeah, so my husband passed away, I don't know, 10 months ago. Shares the whole story. You could tell she was like pretty frustrated and angry, like missing him. And then her mom passed away 3 months ago. But it was weird because her dad, or her husband, passed away pretty much the same way my dad did almost a year ago today, on a ventilator for 12 days, like literally like almost verbatim. And it's like, how can this stuff be accident? That happened twice at the same office with minimal people working there. And I did kind of say, it's like, yeah, I'll be praying for you. But it's like being more bold, like, hey, can I pray for you right now? And it's like, what's the worst? They say, no, I'm good on that. It's like, you can still pray for them in your meantime. So what a good reminder where, yeah, too, it's like, yeah, you should live in a way where people see something different. But to your point, there's not a lot of people coming up and saying, hey, what do you believe in? You seem like a nice guy. It's like, you got to step out and like initiate conversation. And so I just feel like encouraged listening to you. It's like, man, I don't believe it's an accident. Those people are like in your line of work, working at your office at the same place at the same time. You just have to be bold and take a step. So thanks for sharing that.
And like I said, don't act like I don't hear me as I'm saying, like, I got this thing down, Kyle. Like, like, it is not the case. I battled that same, like, it's right there, and I know I should be praying for this person, and I go, but what, you know what? I'll just tell them I'll pray for them, and then when they leave, I'll say my prayers, and then I'll go on my way. And so I battle that same thing, but it's just, and that's why I say it's something I'm really working on. I really want to get better at. The other thing that Taylor does, and this is when he first did it, man, I got mad about it. I was not happy about it, but it's been such a blessing for me in hindsight. Is, I was struggling with something in my life and going through really a valley, and I asked them to pray for me. and he sent me a video or an audio message, and he prayed for me, and he prayed that not that God would solve my problem, not that everything would be okay, that God's will be done. In the situation, that God's will be done, not my will, but God's will be done. I'm like, no, that's not what I asked you to pray for. Like, I asked you to pray for me to fix my situation, not just to have God play out the way that it's supposed to play out, right? And so that was such a powerful lesson for me, right? Like, it is not, because most of my problems, most of the things that I've struggled with come down to ego, like come down to, as a man, we all have some sort of ego, right? And oftentimes that allows us to have success, right? Like, we're willing to push the limits because we want to succeed, right? And that's part of who we are. It's part of our DNA. But when we think we're in charge, when like things are supposed to play out exactly the way that I want them to play out, or I'm shaping them to play out, then that's when I fall on my face the hardest, right? Yeah. And so to ask for God's will to be done instead of my will to be done, I was not happy about that. Like, I was like, no, man, like I need this to play out Tyler's way, but in hindsight, it was probably the most powerful prayer anyone has prayed for me, right? Because I was like, this isn't about you, Tyler. Like, maybe if you took a step back and said, none of this is about you, you wouldn't be in this situation to begin with, right? Like, if you didn't worry about yourself and all these decisions, and you just focused on God and let God's will be done, it will work out. And so that was, another thing that just was a powerful aha, but it's one of those lessons, sometimes you don't want to learn them. That was probably one of those lessons. I'm gonna delete that audio message. You come out with a better prayer than that, man.
Find a new prayer partner.
Yeah,
I did want to ask you about that, because I think there's so much truth with, I think it's pride, guys, we have pride, ego, and you're an athlete. There's a lot of accountability there. And you keep talking about these mentors, people who played a role in every like successful person I know, especially in the entrepreneurial business owner sense. They usually have like their core group of guys that they can go to, and whether it's spiritual help, business help. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Like, how do guys, especially younger guys who maybe they just graduated college, you kind of, all of your people are moving away and you kind of feel lonely or isolated. How have you been able to build a community of whether mentorship or just like support guys around you that are going to push you and challenge you sometimes and call you out on things? Like, how has that played in your life? And when you look back on it, I'm sure you've seen the fruits of it. And how would you advise a guy, especially these young people that work with you, to find like that group of people that are going to push them from a mentorship side of things?
Yeah. I mean, I think, the Bible says, ask and you shall receive, right? Like, seek and you'll find. Like, I sought out people who I knew I wanted to be like, right? And sometimes that as I've been mentored by those people, I realized that's not how I want to be. Like, that's like, maybe it was a successful business person that I'm like, man, if I can just get to where they're at, right? Like, if I can just get to that person's level, then I've made it, right? Then I've made it. And as I've learned the costs or the relationships that were shattered because of getting to that, climbing that ladder or whatever, I'm like, whoa. Like, that's not what I want, right? Like, but helping, they still play a huge role, and they've been very valuable to me. But at the same time, I've been able to learn, but I've often sought them out. Like, I just don't know of a ton of people that, like, two things. I don't know a ton of people that wake up every day and be like, okay, who can I go out and mentor today? Right. Like, that's typically not like a normal thought, right? But I also don't know very many people, maybe because we live in the Midwest and that helps. But I don't know many people that when I've asked them for help, hey, I want to kind of learn from you. I want to learn how you've done to get what you've done to get where you're at, and how you think the way that you think. They all say yes. Like, people are willing to help people who are trying to get better. And like, literally across the board, all over and that technology has made it our ability to connect with those people. They don't have to be in our backyard. But I just find people who I'm like, I think I want to be like them someday, and then I just reach out to them. Like, and I don't know, it's not like rocket science. Again, this is the Iowa thing. We don't do rocket science here. And so like, but it's simple, but it's true. Like you ask and people will extend their arms. But like I said, like I've learned it from like the things that I've wanted, and that comes with age, I think, and your priorities change. And when you have children and get married and things like that, your priorities can change. But then like, I've also like the things I valued so much when I was younger is just like this dream of like seeing how high my business can take me, or get your name in kind of the bright lights type of thing. And that was I would say that was really important to me. So I would find those people who were doing that. And then as I've got to, and there's some amazing ones out there. Okay. So don't take this the wrong way, but all of that stuff comes with a cost. Like all business success comes with some sort of cost. Right. And I started to weigh like, what cost am I willing to pay for that? Like what do I really want to give up? And what do I want when my turn to mentor comes, like, what do I want people to learn from me? Is it how to write the most car insurance? Is it how to grow the biggest business? Or is it how to bring people along a spiritual journey? Is it how to help the next, and so that has really shifted. So now as I've shifted, okay, how can I use my business? Now I want to have a great business, right? And I think I'm very proud of what we've created here, and what we're building. But I also I'm not like a win at all costs type of mindset that like I think I probably was when I first started, right? Sure. And so I think that has played a big role for me. And so if I were to give advice to someone, is find someone that you think could be like, man, I don't know what it is about that person, but I think I want to be like that person. Yeah. And then just ask them to mentor you, like ask them to have a conversation and learn as much from them as possible. And some of it will take you as far as you like. It'll be just the most amazing thing. Sometimes you go, I can't believe I asked that person, but you'll still learn, you'll still grow. And it'll still be a huge part of who you are.
That's good.
Yeah, that's I think that's awesome advice. And I love how it's made me laugh a couple times when you've said things like, listen, I'm just going to live and people are going to ask me, or I'm just going to try really hard and people are going to mentor me. But the theme of kind of what you're saying, and I think how you've gotten to where you are, is by really just putting yourself on the line and being vulnerable, whether that's sharing your faith, asking for help. And I think for guys watching this, especially younger guys, that's a really good habit to get in at a young age. Is don't expect people to read your minds. Don't expect, things to just fall into your lap. They can, right? Things can always kind of happen in ways that we don't understand, but more times than not, we actually have to show up and do that work. Kind of contradictory to that though. And I think a natural question that I had that's related is, you talked about the difference between kind of doing things Tyler's way and living a life that's dependent on Jesus. So say a younger guy's watching this and they're like, what does that even mean? Right? Like what, this guy, he owns a business, he's got a family. It's like, I'm sure when, your kids' diapers need to be changed, or when you've got customers calling, it's like, you're not just saying, hey, Jesus, you grab that one, man. I'm good right now. I'm watching the football game. So can you just kind of give a little bit of context of like, what does that look like? And how do you know when you're living in dependence of Jesus versus out of your own strength and will?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, that's not a question I always get right. Okay, first of all, I would love to say I'm always centered, man. It's not reality. All right. But when I'm in the Word as much as possible, that is really the compass. If I can get in the Word a lot, that helps just make my decisions super, super, super clear about what I should be doing, what I should be spending my time on, and what I shouldn't be spending my time on. And I think a lot of it comes down to earlier what I said is time. What am I choosing to spend my time doing? And what do I spend my time not doing? Because when you do something, you're giving up something always, right? And every work day, if you choose to do something, you're not choosing to do something else. And so being very intentional with your time, what you choose to spend time on, is really, really, really important. And it becomes more important as the more responsibilities that you have. And so like I'm a little bit more selective, or a lot more selective now, about what I do in the evenings. And so something like this, like, I think it's super important to be doing this. I'm super happy to do this, but I don't do it as much as I used to, because I'm giving up time with my family, to have this conversation. I love to do it, right? But you have to understand those things, and being in the word helps me understand what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing. And then once I'm in the word and I understand, I truly like am dependent on my calendar. Like, my calendar tells me what I'm going to be doing and what I'm not going to be doing. And it sounds stupid, but like, my Outlook calendar is my like mental compass, right? Like, so like, if that thing is way off, then like, I know I haven't been in the word, because I know that like, I'm not spending time with my family. I'm just head down and work. The work's most important thing. Because I'll tell myself, and it's very common for business owners to do, like, well, I need to be doing this, right? Like, if I want to get this business to where it needs to be, I need to be grinding, right? And Aaron and you and I talked about this, because that is what we read in every motivational book. It is it's all about you. It's all about the grind. It's all about embrace. And I think all of that stuff's true. Like, I want to give glory to God by the way I show up and I do my work. But at the same time, like, talks about like honoring your family. The Bible talks about being a good husband and being a good father and all of those things. And like, it doesn't say like, are you crushing the 9 to 5, right? Like, did you work 80 hours this week? But we wear those things as a badge of honor. I do too, right? Like, but it gets me, if I can get my calendar in line, if I'm in the word, and again, using my time in working out and stuff like that to listen. It doesn't have to be actually opening up the Bible every day, which I should be doing, but I don't. But if I can listen to sermons and things like that, and get my mind in a good place, then I know, okay, if I'm giving this Tuesday night up, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm giving some time back, right? Like, and giving some time back, extra time to my family and that type of stuff. And so, yeah, man, I would say check your calendar, get in the word. The word it provides clarity. And what I would tell the people when I used to be in management with State Farm, when I talk to my agents, where there's clarity, there's peace. And I just believe that to be true. When people know what's going on, there's a peace involved with that. The Bible will tell us what we need to have going on in our lives. And if we get that right, there's peace. When I'm not in the word, there's very little peace. And I'm just trying to figure it all out on my own, and you get worn out, you get burnt out, you get all of the things.
Yeah. So a lot of what you're saying is revolve around your mental state, where you're at. So my last question for you, Tyler, and you seem like obviously a very sharp guy. I would take it you're probably a reader. I always like to ask people, what are your top 2 or 3 books you would recommend for young guys or just people in general that helps gear your mind, apart from the Bible, given that everything you said, apart from that, what are maybe like 1 to 3 books that have been the most influential on you that you'd recommend to a young guy?
Yeah. Beautiful Outlaw. I don't know if you guys have ever read Beautiful Outlaw. That's a good one. The author's escaping me. But that's a really good one. It for the longest time, I always pictured Jesus as like, this is going to sound really kind of wild, but you gotta bear with me. But like, do you guys ever grow up watching Power Rangers?
Yes.
So in Power Rangers, the old Power Rangers, now this is like 95 Power Rangers, like when you guys were born. The Power Rangers would talk to this, their leader was like a ghost thing in a tube. That's what I was like thought God was. It was like this like tube thing. And then I was like learning more about Jesus. And it's just like every time you read the words in red, it's like you just thought Jesus was like giving this big, powerful talk, And And the beautiful outlaw was like, no, dude, he's just a dude. Like he was like a person, you know? And it was like the very first time that like someone completely humanized Jesus to me, you know? He wasn't glowing everywhere he walked. It was like, no, he was a human being like you and me. And that was just a huge thing for me. And like just there's sarcastic side to him. There was a fun side to him and a serious side to him, all just like us, right? And but that it was the very first time that I ever pictured him like that. And then Wild at Heart is a good one. I know a lot of guys read that one. But that just talking about being a man, right? Like being what it means to be a spiritual man. So those would be the two. I have a lot of business books too, but that's probably a different conversation for a different day. But I do like to read.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I mean, that's good, man. Honestly, I mean, you know, I know going to Southwest and being from Iowa, that's impressive that you stuck with reading as long as you have.
One book a year. Right?
Yeah, that's good, whether you need it or not. Well, yeah, Tyler, I mean, I know, like you said, you're, you know, giving up time for the family to do this. And really that means a lot to us and our listeners. And I've got one final question for you, and feel free to take as much or as little time as you want on this one. But I want to clarify too to the listeners that you might say, okay, you know, it's like these guys are kind of preaching to me, but this is a question that you're going to be speaking to yourself and to Kyle and I as much as anyone watching or listening to this. And that question is, how do you recommend that a young man starts living their spiritual truth? So you talk about knowing your why, living your truth. So kind of wrapping everything we just talked about up, right? Your history, what you're doing now, where you're trying to go in the future, where your shortcomings are. How does a young man wrap all this together? And what does it look like to start living that spiritual truth right now?
Yeah, shoot. I would start just by one, make the first right decision, right? I mean, just start building a foundation based on very strong principles. But two, you have to get a mentor and surround yourself with other people who have the same goals as you do. You have to, because you're not going to get there. Like I would love to say we can do this on our own, and there's just no way. There's no way I can. There's no way, not any. And so if this is real, this is something that like you really want to do, you have to look at your friend group. You have to look at the people you surround yourself with and say, like, is this real? Like, am I living out what I'm saying I believe to be true, right? And sometimes that means, and this is going to sound harsh, but it's real. Sometimes that means you have to fire some friends. Like you have to, and you can still be cordial with people. You're not rude to people. Like nowhere in the Bible does it say to be like, hey, you should just like completely cut ties and like never talk to people again. They're terrible because but like you have to be cautious about who you're spending your time with and the decisions you're making when you're spending time with those people, right? And so that would be the first steps. If this is something important to you, you have to find a spiritual mentor, right? And you know, it's like half the time I would look at, like, when I would think about who I wanted to be or like what type of success I wanted to have, I would look at all these people and they're very multi-bajillionaires, but they're divorced. And I'm going, okay, well, like my dad and mom, like, why can't I just be like them? You know, like what did they do to not, like, they didn't have that, but like, so like readjust to what you think is actually important. Like, and so find a mentor that is going to fall in line to like something that you really want to get better at. And if that's your marriage, if that's relationships, you know, find people that you feel like have strong ones and talk to them and learn as much from them as possible. Because then you will get where you want to go. But it's got to be with the right people around you.
Yeah, man. Well, that's a good word. And I think I can speak on behalf of Kyle and I, and hopefully our listeners as well. But you're definitely one of those men in our lives. And I know we're not incredibly close. We're not talking on a daily or a weekly basis, but we keep a close eye on what you've got going on, man, from afar. And you make us proud as Mustang alums, and as just honestly, as cheesy as it sounds to say, as brothers in Christ. You're just a guy who's really pushing yourself imperfectly to do things the right way. And I've been thinking this the entire episode, but I got to tell you, I think you earned the title of the best dressed men of the kingdom Yes. So I'll end on that note. I don't know if that's a cardigan, a quarter zip. I don't know what that is.
My wife bought me a nice little sweater for
Wow.
Christmas.
You look like you could be hitting the recruiting trail for Southwest, finding the next Tyler Peschong. But no, man, in all honesty, this was a really great conversation, and we truly appreciate you giving us a little bit of your time this evening.
Likewise, guys, appreciate it, and I'm super proud of you guys. I mean, you guys are talk about being bold, right? I mean, you guys, you anytime you put something on the internet, you never know if one person or two persons are going to watch it. And I know there's a risk. I've done it, right? I know that there's an anxiety. It's like I'm gonna hit publish and maybe mom watches, right? But when you're doing it for the right reasons, which you guys are, powerful things will happen. And so kudos to you guys, and super proud of both of you.
We appreciate it, man. And if you're still watching this, we appreciate you and your time as well. We know it's a sacrifice to tune in with us. So we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We hope TP motivated you to be your best spiritually, as a business person, as a husband, a friend, whatever your roles in life may be. So thank you guys for hanging out with us. And until next time,
keep advancing the kingdom.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.